Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155 from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcast. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel Dolion, wishing that your day is going awesome. Whoever you are, wherever you live, hopefully your day is going well and bueno. So currently right now I am living in the LA County and the vaccines are coming out, which is good news for me and my friends because my friends have been very panicky over the whole situation going on in 2020 with, people getting sick. My friend's sister went to a barbershop and then it turns out that the barber had COVID, and so, yikes. No bueno. Really, really bad. Also, my best friend went to a store, and apparently one of the cashiers also had it. So, yeah, my friends are being very hesitant about hanging out and spending time with me. But, as I am saying that, though, vaccines are coming out, and the U.S. just sent, I think it's $1 trillion, they signed something for $1 trillion, and I was like, oh my gosh, well, there goes our taxpayers' money. But, you know what? It's for a good cause. And we're just hoping that by 2021, things are going to go all smooth and settled. Especially by the year 2022, things are all back to normal again. And as I am saying this, oh man, hopefully things will go back to normal. Ironically enough, the UFC, they've been doing really well for themselves financially. According to Dana White, and even in this podcast here with Dana Cormier. So I'll be talking about UFC Fight Night, Stephen Thompson versus Geoff Neal. And it was the last UFC show of the year. It was the last one of the year. We're nearing the holidays. Also, throughout the broadcast, we would hear Daniel Cormier being like, oh man, ain't it awesome that the UFC is doing really well for themselves. I know this has been a tough year, but financially, this is the best year ever for the UFC. And Dana White goes on to say that this was the best year for the UFC in terms of getting people to talk about their organization and the amount of money that they're making and pay-per-view buys and advertising. I think they made more money through the whole Fight Island ordeal than they did ever booking fights with Conor McGregor. Insane. It really is. Though it was surprising to know that Khabib's last fight against Justin Gaethje really didn't sell all that well. Sadly enough, though. But things are what they are, and the direction where the UFC was earlier this year versus how it ended up by the end of it is so weird. There's no way you can ever describe or explain somebody with hindsight of knowledge of what we know now of telling them what the future would be of the year of 2020. Strange. But let's talk about the last UFC events of the year. And after that, later by the end of today's podcast, I'll then go on to the news brief portion of the podcast, to which I discuss general MMA news. And so the main event is with Wonderboy Stephen Thompson versus Geoff Neal. This event took place on Saturday, December 19, at the UFC Apex Facility Building on ESPN Plus in Las Vegas. And I'm just going to say this right now. I am wrong about this fight. I am so wrong. And when I say that I'm wrong, I mean I really believed Geoff Neal would be the favorite going into this fight, winning and defeating Wonderboy Stephen Thompson via knockout in the second round. That was my prediction. I thought Geoff Neal would go and was without a doubt, I see in my mind, was the obvious choice to defeat Stephen Thompson. Also by knockout. By knockout. That was my prediction. And I am completely off. I am just wrong. Just straight up wrong in there. Wonderboy Stephen Thompson proved to me that this guy is still a legitimate contender. And although I believe that Wonderboy Stephen Thompson cannot beat someone like a Colby Covington or a Kamaru Usman. Steve Thompson is still an elite fighter. He's still top 5. Upon winning this thing, he is remaining in the top 5, and it is expected that we're going to see Wonderboy Stephen Thompson versus Jorge Masvidal. And you know what? That'd be a fun fight. They match each other stylistically. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm looking at this and I'm just like, okay, so these two will have a fun fight. Now, I still don't believe Stephen Thompson can go win the belt. I don't think so. I think his skill set is too underdeveloped to fight somebody like Kamaru Usman and kind of Colby Covington. I still agree with Wonderboy Stephen Thompson's assessments that Colby Covington's striking is like not that good. It just, he provides a super high volume of strikes, and then he just wrestles you, but he doesn't really do ground and pound. Like, he is a point system fighter. The way to explain Colby Covington is like, this dude, he hits you a lot of times, but he doesn't really damage you, and he hits you, and then he just like, it just accumulates points over time. I think he overwhelmed RDA. He easily, and with his fight against Robbie Lawler, it's hard for me to be impressed by that, because I'm just like, okay, Robbie Lawler, the dude doesn't even try, right? He really doesn't try. Like, him and Tyron Woodley are the definition of two fighters that you know are capable of doing great things in the octagon, but you don't want to watch them because you know they're not going to try, or they're not going to put that much effort. Like, they're going to go coast by, make their money, good on them. Doesn't mean I want to see that as a fight. But let's go talk about the main event here. And the reason why I thought this fight would end with Geoff Neal winning would be because I believe Geoff Neal was good enough to be able to pressure Stephen Thompson. Because what Stephen Thompson usually fights is that Stephen Thompson is like a tough puzzle to crack, in the sense that it's hard to go get within good range of him without him landing in some stiff, hard strikes. And I thought that Geoff Neal would be the type of, he is the type of fighter, and he accomplished it in this fight. Like, Geoff Neal fought exactly how I thought he would fight in this fight in order to go win. It turns out, though, that wasn't the win condition here. So I believe Geoff Neal, he would pressure Stephen Thompson. He would force himself in, because Geoff Neal is one of those fighters out there who I love seeing, who is absolutely not afraid to just put himself in a bad position in order to go fight in the close range and closing the distance here. Like, he's not a fighting outside the pocket point system fighter, which Wonderboy Stephen Thompson is. So, Geoff Neal, what he did in this actual fight, though, was he came in, bell rang, he got in there, he was all up in the face of Stephen Thompson, and I am so impressed of how good Stephen Thompson is at fighting inside the close range. I am so used to Stephen Thompson either coming outside the pocket of his fighter, poking him, and then getting inside and then hitting one good shot and then coming out. That's the Wonderboy Stephen Thompson I'm used to seeing. And what I saw here was Geoff Neal, he came in, pressured Thompson, and then Thompson, who improved a whole lot of his boxing ability, just like was able to like persevere and do the damage of Geoff Neal, and he himself was able to go and win out in some of these 50-50 exchanges. He was able to win on these 50-50 exchanges, was able to go land in some really good clean shots on the Geoff Neal as they're fighting close up. And also then Stephen Thompson was able to go and back up and hit some free strikes onto Geoff Neal through the mid and long range. So when looking at his fight, we gotta see it as, alright then, Geoff Neal, he is more likely to win the fight through fighting in the close range here, but he's going through the exchanges where you could argue that Stephen Thompson would be winning in some of those exchanges. And then Thompson would then go on and win in the mid range, in the long range. So this leads to Stephen Thompson just having more tools and more variety in his offense, more so than Geoff Neal. And Geoff Neal did not overwhelm Stephen Thompson, and Thompson was able to go and handle the pressure. I believe Neal won the first round. I believe that. There was a headbutt in the first round that was very nasty. Good thing that it didn't really play that much of an impact throughout the rest of the fight here. But Geoff Neal, Geoff Neal and Thompson headbutt each other, and then Geoff Neal proceeded to go win the first round. The judges scored it Stephen Thompson winning every single round, and I'd have to disagree with that. I'd say Geoff Neal won the first round. He might have won the second round, but third, fourth, fifth round was easily Stephen Thompson, because Geoff Neal, like a glass cannon, he put all the energy and exerted it in the first round and the first half of the second round, which led to him slowing down the pace, while Stephen Thompson, his pace and his volume increased over time. Like, you could argue the best round of Stephen Thompson was in the 5th round here. And what is so impressive about this was that Thompson was getting rocked. He was, but he was enduring it and he was taking it, which is something you usually don't see. Usually you see when somebody gets inside, like gets past like the frame of Stephen Thompson and fighting the close range, that's when Stephen Thompson just shuts down. No, that didn't happen. It didn't happen like that. Stephen Thompson was calm and cool, and he was moving so much. Stephen Thompson was moving in the horizontal plane so often and much that it was difficult for Geoff Neal to go and keep catching Thompson consistently. Meanwhile, Stephen Thompson was able to be consistent, and as the fight went on, was able to put up more volume striking by the end of it. And so Stephen Thompson was able to go win the fight through surviving these 50-50 exchanges, winning them at times, having better cardio, and also being able to still poke out Geoff Neal. So in total accumulation of how the fight was going, Thompson edged out Neal. But even though Thompson ended up defeating his opponents by unanimous decision, it was still a close bout. It was still a very close bout, because it wasn't like, oh man, Thompson was just like, steamrolling over Neal. No. Thompson was being rocked a lot. He was being pummeled in the face a lot by Neal. It is Stephen Thompson just did more of the pummeling. And then let me give you the quick fight stats here, because there's a lot of striking that happened here. And so, owner by Stephen Thompson, he landed 45% of his shots, 191 out of 428 attempted total strikes. 428 attempted total strikes. Landed almost half of that. Attempted 406 significant strikes. Landed 42% of that. Now compare the 428 to Geoff Neal's 205 attempted strikes. So Geoff Neal landed 110 out of 205. He landed 54% of his strikes. Geoff Neal's striking accuracy was on point, but the sheer volume that Geoff Neal had, especially going to the second half of the second round, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, was just much more lower than Thompson. And in terms of significant strikes, he landed 85 out of 179, which is 48%. This battle was a back and forth fight, and it was insane on how Stephen Thompson was able to go and put forth that much offense through all five rounds, because I'm really used to Stephen Thompson, slow down fights, he's gonna grind you out, he's gonna go poke you. That's the Wonder Boy I'm usually used to. And now that I'm seeing this other side of him at his age, and I think he's like 36 now. He's currently 36 right now. He's improving. He's improving, and it is scary how much he's improving. There's been talks about like Stephen Thompson being the champion. Like he was expected to be champion, like 3 years ago. And now it kind of like went off course, and now it looks like he's back on course again. So in the post-fight presser, he did challenge Jorge Masvidal, where it was like the and I like how he mentioned, he's like, this is the battle between the nicest MFer versus the baddest MFer. And I'm just like, okay, that's an easy fight to go market, and these two are both fan favorites. Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson being a lot more active on social media and YouTube, and just overall being an all-around likable guy. And so I'm right now looking at the welterweight rankings here. Anthony Pettis, he ended up winning his fights against Alex Moreno. And he's right below Stephen Thompson here. I say, so we have Pettis versus Jorge Masvidal, or Stephen Thompson versus Jorge Masvidal. And in between those fighters, we have Tyron Woodley, who ain't fighting. Tyron Woodley is currently in a 3-fight losing streak. No, I don't. And so with the way how Tyron Woodley is right now, where he's obviously not motivated to fight, I am surprised the UFC haven't cut him. I am really surprised. This wouldn't be the last time the UFC cuts a fighter because they're in a losing streak. And he's obviously in a losing streak, and he obviously doesn't care all that much. Also, while I'm at it though, Nate Diaz. He's ranked number 6 in the rankings. I don't know how. I don't get it, but he is. Thompson versus Nate Diaz will be fun fights. I'm still waiting on Michael Chiesa and Neil Magny are two other fighters you got to keep track on, because those two fighters are also definitely good enough to compete against the top 5. Neil Magny is a dark horse in the welterweight division, and I'm one of those guys who's like, oh man, you gotta watch out for Neil Magny, dude. Now is the time for Neil Magny to go on an insane winning streak, and I think so. I think a fun matchup would be Neil Magny versus Nate Diaz. Not Diaz. Neil Magny versus Pettis would be a stellar fight. And then if they really want to continue booking Michael Chiesa and Tom Woodley, we could have Chiesa versus Woodley. But the big fight for the welterweight division would be on February 13, 2021, to which we finally see Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns. So that's the current state of the UFC's welterweight division. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after the short break here. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and we are back. I am discussing UFC Fight Night, Thompson versus Neal at the UFC Apex Facility Building. And so I just recap, winner by Stephen Thompson versus Geoff Neal. Winner by Stephen Thompson proved me wrong. He proved me and a whole lot of people wrong, saying that, oh, he's washed up, he's not in his prime anymore, he's kind of in a gatekeeper journeyman role. And you know what, Geoff Neal, so Geoff Neal, prior to the fights, he was already being compared to fighters like Uriah Hall and stuff. Like Uriah Hall, Ovin St. Preux, being like, oh man, he's like this prospect who in time is gonna go and be a contender and become a future champion. And so Geoff Neal, his stock has dropped since his fight against Stephen Thompson, to which a lot of people thought he would go win. But Geoff Neal, he had a really good showing. It wasn't like Stephen Thompson just completely dominated him. No, this is a very close back and forth battle to which he lost based on attrition. And then we go to the co-main event, which is Jose Aldo versus Marlon Chito Vera. So I didn't expect much from Marlon in his fight against Jose Aldo. No, I knew this was going to be a fun fight. This is a close bout, but Jose Aldo, this guy's good. Not only is he good, he's great. Man, like, Jose Aldo, he's always that fighter. Every single year we're like, man, I think Jose Aldo, I think he's getting too old. I think he's getting too old. Does he have it? And he always proves me wrong, and he proves all the haters and doubters wrong, that Jose Aldo is still as good. And here's the thing, this is a three-round bout that he ended up winning. He could have easily gone 5 rounds and continued dominating his opponents in 2 rounds there. Jose Aldo's striking and his speed and accuracy is absolutely insane. It is insane how darn good his... okay, wow. So I'm looking at fight stats here. Jose Aldo ended up winning this fight despite lesser strikes significantly. So, Jose Aldo landed 60 of 86 total strikes. 70%. He landed 70% of his strikes. He then landed 44 of 70 significant strikes. He landed 63%. This dude's striking accuracy was without a doubt the best in this entire show. Meanwhile, we got here, Marlon Vera. Okay, so here's the thing. Marlon Vera just was a little bit inefficient, but he landed 92 of 133, 70%. Down 69% to Jose Aldo, 70%, but it was super close. But he landed 92 of 133, and then landed 46 of 82 significant strikes. So the fight stats say that Marlon Vera should have won this fight. The dude landed 32 more strikes than Jose Aldo. So how did Jose Aldo win? Well, you have to measure a fight based on fight stats and also based on the eye test. And this fight here, yes, Marlon Vera landed a lot more strikes than Jose Aldo, but it's one of those scenarios where, I don't know, it's very similar to like this. Okay, so it's hard to explain this because when I saw the fight, I was like, oh man, dude, Jose Aldo won the fight. But Marlon Vera, he attempted more strikes and he landed more strikes. So it makes sense for why Vera would win. But unless you actually watch the fight, you'd realize that most of the striking came in from clinching, through, being on the cage. Who hit harder? Jose. Okay, so it's very similar to, I'm trying to explain it now. Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz. Alright then. So in Cody Garbrandt versus Dominic Cruz landed more strikes than Cody Garbrandt. He landed more strikes, more leg kicks, more body shots, a much greater variety in volume of strikes, whether it be like uppercuts, head kicks, body kicks. Dominic Cruz technically did more than Cody Garbrandt in that fight, in the title fight he had. But if you saw the actual fight, in all those exchanges, Cody Garbrandt was the one winning. Yes, Dominic Cruz landed 4 clean strikes to the face, 4 clean jabs, but Cody Garbrandt just ended up going for 1 right overhand and pretty much had a knockdown on Cruz. And though there were no knockdowns in this fight here, but it was so obvious on who here was actually winning and dominating the striking exchanges based on the eye test that you gotta give it to Jose Aldo. Now, is it inconsistent? Yes, it's inconsistent, but I'm not a judge here. You have to judge a fight based on a combination of eye test and fight stats, and through me and a whole lot of people's eye test, the majority of us chose Jose Aldo winning the fight. But, you know what? It's mixed martial arts. The way how you judge a fight is very different. It's a case-by-case basis there. But I would have not been surprised if there were some people who said, oh man, Marlon Vera actually won the fight. And here's the thing. Marlon Vera had a really good showing. And he came to the fight with low expectations of himself. And he was able to get the rub and win this fight. He was able to garner more attention for himself and increase his own stock upon losing to Jose Aldo. A good shot for Jose Aldo here. He expects to get a title fight soon, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does get a title fight soon. But what is going on right now in the UFC bantamweight rankings here? Who is available to go compete with? And so Peter Yan, he'll be fighting against Aljamain Sterling. That's the next matchup. We also have Corey Sandhagen. He's expected to do a fight against Frankie Edgar on February. That is going to be an absolute stellar fight here. Jose Aldo. Marlon Moraes just lost to Rob Font. And Rob Font is expected to go fight, the higher... Okay, so Cody Garbrandt, even though he was touted to be next in line for title fights, I still don't like the fact that Cody Garbrandt was expected to have a title bout after his victory over Rafael Sansao. Good performance. I'm just saying that compared to everyone else here, you gotta go through a winning streak. I just believe that you gotta go through a winning streak in order to go get a title fight. If you're not a winning streak, then you don't get a title fight. Aljamain Sterling fights Peter Yan, Corey Sandhagen against Frankie Edgar. We don't know when the turn of Cody Garbrandt is. We have Pedro Munoz getting ready to go fight against Jimmy Rivera. So, what would make sense here, a dream fight, ice for me, would be Jose Aldo versus Cody Garbrandt. Or we could see Jose Aldo versus Rob Font, or Rob Font against Cody Garbrandt, and Marlon Moraes. I don't expect him to come back anytime soon, especially after his last loss. So we might see him by mid of 2021, maybe. But even then, that's a huge maybe. So the bantamweight division right now, it is busy. It's a very busy division right now from 1 through 5. And Jose Aldo and Cody Garbrandt, even though they're outside the top 5, those are two fighters who you can easily see slide themselves into possibly fighting for a title sometime mid to late of 2021. We then move on to at least what I believe was the fight of the night. Coming to this, I thought this was going to be the most exciting fight, and it was. And it was Michelle. By the way, no disrespect to Stephen Thompson, Geoff Neal, and Jose Aldo, Marlon Vera. No disrespect to all those other fighters. It is coming to the show here. I really thought that this fight was going to be the most exciting one, and to me, it was the most fun fight to watch. And it was Michelle Pereira versus Kalen Williams, a.k.a. Chaos Williams. And this fight was what I thought it would be. Now, I disrespected Michel Pereira. I was on the hype train for Kalen Williams, and it was a really strong showing by both fighters. It really was. I discredited Michel Pereira. A lot of people thought Kalen Chaos Williams would be the one who would be victorious in this bout here. And I'm going to be honest, both these fighters are special, man. This is special. Chaos Williams, this dude has intensity written all over his face, man. And this guy fights like a proper warrior. Now, this was everything that the general casual MMA fan wants to see in their fights. You got these two hyper-athletic, quick, hard-hitting guys pummeling each other, and they're both fighting a very exciting fighting style. Chaos Williams, no nonsense, is gonna get in there and knock you out. He pretty much is like the Derek Lewis of the welterweight division. He is what Tyron Woodley was in the welterweight division X years ago. And it's really interesting to see how dangerous of a fighter Chaos Williams is and how much he has no fear. He is one of those fighters who you could easily say, be like, alright, this guy here, because he lacks a grappling game, this dude I doubt can become champion until he develops more as of an MMA fighter here. But he's exciting. He's an exciting fighter that is very green, that has a whole lot of room for improvements, but still exciting. And the same thing also applies for Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira is a huge welterweight. The guy is 6'1", he's jacked, he is hyper athletic, he moves a lot more faster, contrary to his size, relative to the other welterweights. The guy is constantly moving at a horizontal plane here, and I always say this, fighters should stop moving purely in the vertical. Like, Dominic Cruz does this perfectly, and of course, like, I'm not saying that fighters who move in the horizontal plane are just automatically better. I'm just saying it would be good for, in terms of, like, variety and versatility of your fighting, and it gives you more option if you can go fight within a horizontal plane. And this is what happens here. We got one fighter fighting in a horizontal plane versus one fighter fighting primarily in the vertical plane, which was Michel Pereira and Kalen Williams. Now, this fight here, to describe it, was Kalen Williams runs at Michel Pereira and just throws bomb after bomb. Meanwhile, Michel Pereira is throwing out these strange strikes. That's how I explain it. Strange strikes coming in from weird different angles, and that he has such a variety of strikes from, like, alright, he's going to go for a forearm smash, to a body kick, to a leg kick, to a spinning side kick, moves over to his left side, then go for a left hook, then moves on to the other side, goes in a reverse spin kick. The dude has so many options in his striking ability. So it just really became a case of, alright then, Kalen Williams hits harder, but Michel Pereira also hits hard, and he's got a great variety of strikes. And this was, all these fights are very similar, and it's hard to judge these fights. It really is, because it's eye test and fight stats here. So I'm going to look up the fight stats here to see how close it was. And wow, I was right in the sense that Kalen Williams did in fact land more strikes. We had Michel Pereira landed 60% of his strikes, 56 out of 94. Meanwhile, landing 44 of 79 significant strikes, which is up to 56%. In terms of total strikes for Kalen Williams, he landed 62 out of 134 strikes, 46%. He landed 6 more strikes and attempted about 40 more strikes. He also landed 55 of 127 significant strikes, 43%. So he landed 11 more significant strikes than Michel Pereira. But Michel Pereira, by the end of the third round, he was able to get ground control in, and Kalen Williams really showed. It really showed how inexperienced Kalen Williams is in the ground and his wrestling grappling ability here. And Michel Pereira pretty much controlled Kalen Williams for the most part by the latter half of the third round here. So Michel Pereira, second round, this is how I judge it. I say, first round goes to Michel Pereira. Second round was the same thing in the sense that Michel Pereira was able to land in he landed more strikes in a per round basis. He landed more strikes in a per round basis in terms of higher volume. Third round, Kalen Williams landed more strikes, but he then got taken down. So the way you decide the third round was, okay, who do you give the point to? Do you give the point to the guy who landed more strikes, or do you give the point to the guy who had more ground control? And in the third round there, I had to say Michel Pereira. So the only round Kalen Williams, how I viewed it, could have possibly won was in the third round, but then he got taken down. So you have to judge a fight by eye test and fight stats. So I say Michel Pereira won the striking exchanges in the first and second round. Meanwhile, Chaos Williams was winning the first half of the third round, but then got taken down. So based off that, I gotta say the only round he could have won was third round. So Michel Pereira, in my viewpoints, won the fight via unanimous decision. And then when it went to the judges' scorecards, it became unanimous decision in favor of Michel Pereira. So I recommend everybody and anybody to watch this right now. Chaos Williams, this truly was his first test. Because in all Chaos Williams fights, it's always him mowing down his competition. Like, no fear, it gets in there, knocks it within a span of just a couple seconds here. Now he's fighting against someone like Michel Pereira, who fights way more differently than any other fighter Chaos Williams has fought in the past here. Some guy who throws in a large variety of kicks, a large variety of strikes. He's really good in clinching, throwing on knees all the time. A fighter who is very dynamic, constantly moves on the horizontal plane, is very unorthodox. The footwork of Michel Pereira is something that's it's spectacular to watch at, because he's doing this, like, how to explain, like capoeira kind of style. It isn't really capoeira, but it kind of is, in the sense that he's constantly moving his feet left, right, constantly, which leads to Chaos Williams struggling and trying to find the right angles, and Chaos Williams being hesitant and trying to pursue in his striking. As a result, from Michel Pereira's footwork, really made it easy for Pereira to go and just slowly defeat Chaos Williams with the striking and making him very confused. Daniel Cormier said it best, that it was hard for Chaos Williams to find the right openings for Pereira because he was too confused of the footwork of Pereira. And so after the short commercial break here, I'll be discussing the rest of UFC Fight Night, Neal versus Thompson.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back, and so I'm discussing UFC Fight Night that happened this past Saturday, headlined by Wonderboy Stephen Thompson and Geoff Neal. So we had Marlon Moraes versus Rob Font in the bantamweight division. This fight was certainly eye-opening for me. Eye-opening for me in the sense that I did not know who Rob Font was going to this fight here. I know Marlon Moraes, and for this bout here, it was expected it was going to be an all-out brawl, like two guys striking it out in the stand-up here. And Marlon Moraes has been competing at a much more higher level than Rob Font, and also was competing with the very best, was at one point a title contender, while Rob Font was going up and moving the ladder. And I thought to myself that Marlon Moraes was going to defeat Rob Font because I was more impressed off the highlights I've seen, not from the match I've seen from Marlon Moraes, and the highlights I've seen from Rob Font. I have seen Rob Font fought before in the past, and I just didn't think, and it was him fighting against a lower card guy, I would say a top 10. And so I was very positive that Marlon Moraes would be the one winning this fight here. But I admit, once again, I am wrong. I am wrong in many fights here. I thought Geoff Neal would win the fight. I was wrong. I thought Chaos Williams was going to defeat Michel Pereira. I was wrong. I even thought that Greg Hardy was going to defeat Marcin Tybura in the opening bout, and I was wrong about that also. But Rob Font versus Marlon Moraes here, this fight was very strange to me, since Daniel Cormier said it best, in the sense that when we saw Moraes versus Rob Font, we thought this was going to be a striking battle. Two guys slugging it out, and whoever can make the least amount of mistakes, whoever is better in their striking accuracy and their proficiency, whoever can overwhelm their opponent first, will be the one who will win the fights. And the second the bell rang, I think 20 seconds in, Marlon Moraes, he goes in there, shoots in for a double leg takedown, and starts wrestling with Rob Font. And Marlon Moraes' strategy was pretty obvious. In the sense, like, Rob Font, this guy has very little wrestling background. He hasn't had any experience fighting in the UFC, fighting against dudes who are primarily wrestlers. He's a striker first, grappler second. Marlon Moraes, striker first, grappler second. And Marlon Moraes, his corner crew and his strategy was, okay, so I'm going to go and fight really smart here. I will take advantage of my superior grappling experience and my overall just fight experience more so than Rob Font. I'm going to take him down, I'm going to take advantage of him, and I'm going to ground and pound him, and I'm going to go for the quick victory. That was what the strategy was for Marlon Moraes. Now, what instead actually happened was that Rob Font had superb grappling ability out of nowhere that no one expected. His defensive wrestling was really darn good. He was able to get out of Marlon Moraes within the span of a minute. Within 1 minute, he was able to get up from the takedown. Got to stand up. And Rob Font, I've never seen Marlon Moraes ever, and he's fought the champion, ever be overwhelmed in the striking exchanges like he did against Rob Font. Rob Font's striking proficiency was out of this world here. Let me check out the fight stats here, but I'm pretty sure it's I'm right. So Marlon Moraes, he ended up landing 12 for 16 in his striking. The early portion of this bout here was very close, but still Marlon Moraes did shoot him for the takedown. Rob Font, he landed 80%. He landed 33 of 41 total strikes. 30 of 37 significant strikes. 30-37. This dude was able to land 81% of the significant strikes, landing in the cleanest jabs and combinations you can ever see. And the dude knocked out Marlon Moraes in the first round, 3 minutes and 47 seconds in, by KO. Rob Font's striking ability is on point, really damn good. Really good. And it is eye-opening to see how good Rob Font was in terms of handling a pressure situation that the majority of people just did not expect. The majority of people did not expect Marlon Moraes to go shooting for a takedown. The majority of people didn't expect Rob Font to be able to handle himself in a pressure situation, fighting against a top elite fighter in Marlon Moraes, fighting in a style that he's not comfortable with, the wrestling. So it is an eye-opening bout here from Rob Font. I am incredibly impressed, and I know I'm overhyping him just a wee bit here, but I believe Rob Font, based on the striking he showed over here against Marlon Moraes, I think he is definitely good enough to be able to handle the striking of Peter Yan. And I expect big things coming from this guy by 2021. Now, I don't think Rob Font is going to fight for the title in 2021. I just think he has maybe 1 or 2 more fights left. If he can go and win both those fights, they can go and compete for the title. He could fight for the title maybe early 2022. That's what I'm expecting, though. But yeah, great showcase there by Rob Font, who hasn't fought since December of last year. Dang, really good. I'm very impressed by that. Really good showcase there. And so, the opening bouts, this entire card, this card was not a UFC pay-per-view event, but like, oh my goodness, this card was good enough to be a pay-per-view event here. We had Marcin Tybura versus Greg Hardy being the opening bouts at heavyweights. Now then, in the media day scrum, we had Greg Hardy talking about how after he's done doing what he's doing here in MMA, he's going to become a professional boxer. He'll be, because the world needs more celebrity professional boxers. Okay, I know Greg Hardy's an athlete and all, but really, right now, who are the most famous people out there who are boxing? Like Logan Paul and Jake Paul. So the state of boxing is kind of like, we got 3 darn good boxers in Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, and Deontay Wilder. And Greg Hardy, in a media scrum, said that, you know what? After I'm done with MMA, I'll be a pro boxer, and I'm gonna go and fight. He says he can go fight Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua. And I'm like, no. I understand that you've been practicing, you've been working really hard. Good on you that you have confidence in yourself, but you're not going to be either, guys. And then here, he fought against Marcin Tybura. So,
the best way to explain every Marcin Tybura fight is Rock'em Sock'em Robots. And Greg Hardy had a really darn good first round. First round easily was Greg Hardy. The problem, though, is that Marcin Tybura is a walking tank, and he has no problem pressuring his opponents if it means going and getting hurt in order to go find an opening for the victory. And that's what happened here. So Greg Hardy, he's winning in the striking exchanges here. Marcin Tybura, he's losing it out, and then he goes in for a takedown on Greg Hardy, and then it was either he was at half guard or at side control in the second round here. And Greg Hardy, Michael Bisping was doing commentary, so like, this really showcases, how inexperienced Greg Hardy is. He's really good at boxing. He really showcased how good his boxing has developed. But Greg Hardy, though, he can't wrestle. He can't grapple. He doesn't understand the fundamentals of how to get out from the situation when he's being grappled, when he's in bottom. And it was shown here. Marcin Tybura, takedown, went from full guard into side control. Then Marcin Tybura is just hammering down, like strikes from the top on Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy, he isn't holding the arms. He isn't trying to move to a new position. He isn't trying to roll over. He's not trying to do anything to go stand up. All he's doing is that he's putting his arms up. Now, he's not really enduring that much damage from the ground and pound by Marcin Tybura, but he's just there, not really defending himself. He's getting hit. He's getting pummeled. And we still had about he was getting pummeled for like 1 minute straight. And we had 30 seconds left in the second round. It would be ridiculous for Greg Hardy just to continue getting pummeled for 30 straight seconds. And then the referee called the fight. Marcin Tybura ended up winning the fight via TKO. And when Greg Hardy stood up from the ground and pound, he looked visibly tired, man. This dude looked exhausted. He was visibly tired. He looked like there's no way that guy could continue fighting in the third round. And so, congratulations by Marcin Tybura there for defeating Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy, you know what? I'll be perfectly honest. Greg Hardy, if you want to go into a career in boxing, man, you should do it. You should do it. You're way too inexperienced of a grappler and a wrestler. You did not showcase anything in clinching. You threw barely any leg kicks. And your wrestling ability is very lackluster. And there is a lot more money you can make from boxing than you can as a UFC fighter. So, Greg Hardy, dude, if you want to become a professional fighter and you don't think you can go cut it out in the UFC, feel free to do so, man. You make a lot of money there. I'm pretty sure a person like you can... It's more likely for you to be more successful as a boxer for a fighter like him, as opposed to being a UFC fighter. UFC fighters are a lot more complicated, a lot more technical, a lot more complex in the fighting. It's the same reason why Paige Van Zandt, why she went into bare knuckle fighting championships. It's because her striking is really good, but her grappling ability is very lackluster. And through her competing at BKFC, which is an organization I can see Greg Hardy competing for, Paige Van Zandt doesn't have to think all that much about defending takedowns or defending leg kicks or body shots or defending the clinching. No, she can just go primarily focus on boxing, which is something she is really good at. And the same thing also applies for Greg Hardy. He's really good at boxing, and if he wants to be a professional boxer, feel free to do so. I wouldn't be surprised if he, along with Tyron Woodley, are two fighters who end up getting cut by the UFC. And as I'm recording this right now, there have been no reports of MMA fighters continually being cut. Remember, there's a report out there, Dana White saying that there will be 60 fighters being cut by the end of December. Only a small handful have been cut so far. We still have multiple left to go. So the future of Greg Hardy now is very bleak, but I can't really be worried about the guy. The guy can make money and will be successful. And if he chooses to do something else other than fighting for the UFC, I can see him becoming super successful right there. I can see him being successful at BKFC. I can see him being successful at as a professional boxer. I can truly see that. So, no shame for being cut from the UFC. So I'm going to do a quick rundown here of the prelims here. So we had Anthony Pettis defeating Alex Moreno here. Anthony Pettis showing that Father Time is not going against him. Both Pettis and winner by Stephen Thompson are two fighters who, in the past year, have been placed in that journeyman role, but are really trying to bring themselves back up from being gatekeepers. We had CR Eubanks versus Pani Kanzed. I love CR Eubanks here, but for as good of a striker... So, CR Eubanks is a lot like Alex Hernandez. or is it Alex Hernandez, or no, Alexander Hernandez, yeah, Alexander Hernandez, in the sense that he and her are not fighting wrong. Like, their form is on, like, their striking and their form is really good. It's on point. Like, if you were to watch them fight, you'd be like, yeah, they're both fighting perfectly well. They're both landing their shots clean. They don't need to really make any adjustments to their game. They're fighting really well. But their ceiling is low. And the reason why their ceiling is low is because they're not that fast. Like, they're not that fast as strikers. Their striking accuracy is alright. And they're not really that much of a power puncher. Both of these fighters, aesthetically, if you just look at them, are striking really well. But because they lack that extra power or that extra speed or that extra sense of accuracy here, or that reaction timing, they have a shorter ceiling, but a high floor. So for Sarah Eubanks, it's upsetting that she lost again, but she lost against a great fighter in Khanzad. And then in catchweight, we had Darren Wynn defeating against Antonio Arroyo via unanimous decision there. It was a catchweight, sadly, and I don't like catchweight fights because A, one fighter loses money, and B, it means nothing in the grand scheme of the rankings here. Yes, I know people make fun of rankings in the sense that they don't matter that much, but they kind of do. We had Jen Robertson losing against Talia Santos. I'm really happy for Talia Santos. I really am. Because Talia Santos, she ended up losing her last bout in under 40 seconds. I think it was against Mackenzie Dern. And then, Mackenzie Dern, she went out there, pretty much, tapped her out within the span of, 30 seconds. Really tough on Talia Santos, losing against a really good fighter in that kind of fashion. But she had a good showcase here against Jillian Robertson, was able to show off her kickboxing ability. So good off from Santos. We had Tafon Nchukwi, I can't say his name. Tafon Nchukwi defeating against Jamie Pickett, Jimmy Flick defeating Cody Durden, and Christos Giagos against Carlton Midas. And that was UFC Fight Night, won by Stephen Thompson versus Geoff Neal. I was wrong in a lot of my predictions. I completely own up to that. But this final card here, which is the final UFC card for the year of 2020, it was really good. It was a really good showcase of fighters. It was a showcase that we have gatekeepers and journeymen who, although are outside top 5, are really darn good and are still huge threats and, believably, can go compete for the title at some point maybe next year, whether it be Jose Aldo, whether it be Anthony Pettis, whether it be Wonderboy Stephen Thompson, whether it be Rob Font. We got fighters here that do not have high expectations coming in to this year of 2020, who are walking away from the year of 2020 raising their stock. So good on them for that. You are listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after the short break here as I move on to the news brief portion of the podcast here, to which we look at the wacky world of mixed martial arts. What's going on there? Are we still having Michael Bisping, who for some reason is reacting to Jake Paul callouts now? I don't know. MMA is a strange world, and I'll be back with a news brief. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. And so, moving on to the news brief portion of the podcast here. It's being reported out there. Actually, it's not being reported. Michael Bisping himself has responded to this. In that Jake Paul, one of them, has called out Michael Bisping for a boxing fight. And Michael Bisping is open to it. And I'm really sad about that. But I had a dream about this. So, one fighter I really want to see fight against the Paul brothers will be Khabib. You know what? They'd be up to do it. Khabib Nurmagomedov. I don't think Khabib would be up for it, though, because he just doesn't care about, the whole online influencer world. But if I could see Khabib wrestle either Logan or Jake Paul in an MMA fight, I would be so happy about that. It would just be him taking them down and then smashing them. And that, to me, would be fun. It'd be really fun, and that's something I can guarantee you a lot of people would pay money to go see. whole lot of money to see. And so this is being reported in by SBNation.com, being written in by Jesse Holland. Geoff Neal suffered congestive heart failure prior to Wonderboy loss. UFC let him fight anyway. So Geoff Neal, who blasted his way into the promotion by way of Dana White's Contender Series, is disappointed with his performance at UFC Vegas 17. So, after all, Geoff Neal, apparently he suffered congestive heart failure prior to his fight against Thompson, as well as sepsis, then somehow battled 4 grueling rounds completely blind in one eye. That's before we even mentioned the issues his corner had with COVID-19, making you wonder how his fights stay together when so many others fell apart. Neal wrote on his Instagram, "So much adversity leading up to this fight. Sepsis, congestive heart failure, 3 of my corners testing positive for COVID, with one of them being the general safe side. But I still made that walk and fought that fight. Couldn't see out of my right eye for 4 rounds and still managed to hang in there with a guy who's been kicking butt since I was like 9 years old. I don't know about y'all, but I'm proud of me." So, Nevada State Athletic Commission, the NSAC, requires all fighters to pass a pre-fight medical exam prior to stepping into the cage in the absence of a regulatory body. The promotion and its physicians follow the NSAC guidelines, which makes me wonder how Neal was able to get through despite all the red flags. And I was thinking, dude, if this dude went through all that in a really close battle against Thompson, how much better would he be if he was 100% completely healthy? Dang, this dude is a proper warrior, man. Oh, wow. So I'm very impressed that Geoff Neal was able to get to that point, knowing what he had to go through. But wow. And so Anthony Pettis is coming in by BJPen.com. Anthony Pettis credits cutting down on drinking as key to recent UFC success. This is being written by Adam Martin. Pettis defeated Alex Moreno via nice decision at UFC Vegas 17 for a second straight win after beating Don Cerrone at UFC 249. From a talk with ESPN's Brett Okamoto, Anthony Pettis says that cutting down in drinking is a reason for his recent success. He goes on to say, and I quote, "When I won, I was like drinking because of celebration drinking. If I lost, I was drinking because of sorrow drinking. My diet would get bad and I would be all over the place with like my outside life. When I got to training camp, I was like 100% strict, but what you do outside the camp really matters inside your camps. I think I was doing like these forced training camps coming off a win. I was coming off being happy and doing a bunch of sort of stuff. You know, I cleaned up that part of my life and I'm taking fighting a lot more seriously now. It feels good to see the progression and win 2 fights in a row for such a long time." Following the win over Moreno, Pettis indicated that he would be interested in a rematch at lightweight against former UFC interim lightweight champion Tony Ferguson. With Ferguson coming off back-to-back losses against Gaethje and that would be a stellar fun fight. For those of you who don't remember, in the Ferguson versus Pettis fights, Pettis ended up getting injured early in the fight, which prevented him from throwing out leg kicks, which led to Tony Ferguson taking advantage of him and being able to throw a higher volume of strikes than Anthony Pettis. But in the actual fight, when they did fight, it was fun. It was a super fun, exciting bout between 2 dudes just completely going at it. I still remember the image of which Tony Ferguson, his face is all battered up, he's bleeding all over, he looks like he just came from a train wreck, and the dude is smiling, he's laughing. Meanwhile, Pettis is also smiling and laughing, and that definitely is a fight that I think a lot of fight fans would definitely be excited to go watch again. So, Matt Nunes versus Megan Anderson was rescheduled to fight for March. Not surprised, alright then? For every single time there's a Matt Nunes fight, you can expect that fight being canceled like 2 or 3 times, okay? Amanda Nunes never goes into any fight, any of it, until she knows she is 100% healthy. And when we do see it, dang, then like, Amanda Nunes is pretty much unstoppable. Actually, she is unstoppable. Do I expect Amanda Nunes to defeat Megan Anderson? Yes. Do I expect Amanda Nunes, upon defeating Megan Anderson, retire the women's featherweight division? Yes. I would love to see Megan Anderson defeat Amanda Nunes. I really would. Just so the featherweight division can continue going. I know the UFC wants to go and focus primarily on the bantamweight division right now. And the featherweight division, there seems to be no actual effort being putting in into trying to revitalize that division, the same way they try to revitalize the flyweight and the bantamweight division for the men. And so, yeah, the coming up March with Nunes, Megan Anderson, if that fight continues, that could be the very last time we get to see a women's featherweight bout in the UFC. And so this is coming in by MMAJunkie.com here. So for those of you who are unaware, Anthony Pettis, he fought off the last fight in his fight contract for the UFC. And now we had Michel Pereira. He's challenging Anthony Pettis, but we're still unsure of whether or not Pettis will make a comeback for the UFC again, whether he'll sign a new contract with them, or, there's been a lot of fighters who've been signing contracts with other organizations. For instance, Yoel Romero and Anthony Rumble Johnson, they're both at Bellator. Paige Van Zandt is at BKFC. We had other fighters moving to Bellator. One Championship is always an organization you can always look out for. So, yeah, there are definitely options. Fabrice Verdum, is he with PFL? I think Fabrice Verdum is currently with PFL right now. And Kayla Harrison is making a lot of noise right now at PFL also, even though she didn't fight for the UFC. She's still a huge major name in the world of mixed martial arts. So the future for Pettis right now, we're kind of not sure of what to expect. But Pettis does go on to say, I'm going to take the holiday off, honestly. Pettis told ESPN, this was the last fight on my UFC contract, and I don't know what's going to happen. I'm open to see what they come back at me. My little brother's outside the UFC now. He's mentioning Sergio Pettis. And it's one of those things like, I'm not attached to anything anymore. I'm taking one fight at a time. My goal is to be the best version of myself. Obviously, the UFC is where the best guys are at. So I would love to fight in this organization still. But we'll see what happens. Contracts, negotiations are something that happens outside my world. I still have an agent to take care of all that. So, what is the future for Anthony Pettis then? He did say that he would be open to fighting against Tony Ferguson. He going to say, I think Tony makes the most sense, man. Coming off his 2 losses and he's fighting tough dudes. And that's what I hate about this sport. Guys are like, Tony's done. He's a dangerous dude. But that would be a good fight for me if I jump back to the lightweight mix. And that is if he does make a comeback. So moving forward, Pettis said he'll take action based on what will allow him to finish his career on high notes. He goes to say, I just watched that documentary, Macho Time, about boxer Hector Camacho, and just seeing his legacy play out, I am writing my legacy right now. And I've got to take this part serious. I've done so much in the sport. WC World Champ, UFC World Champ, wins in 3 different weight divisions. I've done a lot. Right now, it's about legacy. The rest of these couple years, the goal I wrote down is to win every round and every fight. I lost one of those rounds, so I've got to make adjustments and keep getting better. The future of Anthony Pettis is right now unknown. We've seen a lot of movement going on with fighters moving to different organizations. And also, don't forget, there will be 60 fighters being cut by the end of this month. So I will not be surprised if the UFC were to not even attempt to give another contract to Anthony Pettis. But I don't feel sad for Anthony Pettis because he can go on, unlike last time, he can go on and move on to different organizations. He can make money doing other things. He's only in his 30s. So even if the UFC doesn't offer him a contract, I can guarantee you he will be offered money to fight somewhere. So it is coming in by SBNation.com. Real 135-pound champ TJ Dillashaw responds to Jose Aldo's call-out. TJ Dillashaw's name was on the lips of a lot of bantamweight fighters as the former champ prepares to return after a 2-year suspension. This is being written in by Ryan Harkness. On January 18, 2021, TJ Dillashaw will return from a 2-year USADA suspension for taking EPO, leading to a failed flyweight title bout bid against Henry Cejudo. And it looks like he's got a lot of people interested in the fights. Top of the list is former featherweight kingpin and turned stubborn bantamweight contender Jose Aldo. Coming off back-to-back losses to Marlon Moraes and Peter Yan, don't capture the quality of his performances in those bouts, and he proved himself to be legit, defeating against Marlon Chito Vera. He goes on to say that as far as the next fight, it would be Dillashaw. Aldo said immediately after his win, Dana, make it happen. I don't have anything personal with TJ Dillashaw, adding during the post-fight presser, that's what I'm going to say. I just want to make a great fight for the fans. I think TJ is a great former champion. I think this fight makes sense for everybody. And Rob Font says that he'd be open to fighting against TJ Dillashaw also. And then TJ Dillashaw on his Twitter says, I heard everyone's calling me out because they all know that's my belt. So TJ Dillashaw, if you look at his Instagram, the dude is jacked. And also, he is prepping up for a return in the year of 2021. TJ Dillashaw is up before he was suspended. He was my favorite fighter to watch. He really was. And back then, it would have been a complete dream fight. TJ Dillashaw versus Jose Aldo. Now, of course, TJ Dillashaw, we're not sure of what version of TJ Dillashaw we're going to see. I'm not sure if TJ Dillashaw versus Jose Aldo, if that fight could main event a card. But those two are legends. I'm going to say right now. TJ Dillashaw and Jose Aldo, I guess how I view them, are two future UFC Hall of Famers. And one could argue that TJ Dillashaw, he might have saved the UFC fight division. If it weren't for him being so antagonistic for the UFC fight division, that division would have not even continued. I genuinely believe that. And so for me, as a fight fan, Dillashaw versus Jose Aldo, that would be a complete dream fight. And now knowing how great of a fighter Rob Font is, it would be great to see Rob Font against TJ Dillashaw. That's also another great matchup. So whatever happens for TJ Dillashaw, those are two dangerous killers. Can you imagine that? Getting off 2 years, being suspended for 2 years, not coming back, and not being in ring shape, and then you're coming back and you're going to fight against one dude who dominated a former title contender in Marlon Moraes in Rob Font, and then fighting against a former world champion in Jose Aldo, who, by the way, looks in physically great shape. He looks physically great. The guy fights great. Those are two tough fighters out there. I think it'd be smarter from the perspective of TJ Dillashaw's camp to have TJ Dillashaw fight against somebody outside the top 10. Then from then on, you can go and fight somebody within the top 10. I think it is way too risky for Dillashaw. It is very similar to Fabrice Verdum when he just came back from his suspension. They do look really terrible against Ben Rothwell. It was Verdum against Ben Rothwell, and Verdum looked awful in that fight. But that fight ended up being a tune-up fight for him. He ended up, going back to training camp, and he looked a lot more better in his second bout after coming back in his return. So, I say Dillashaw fight somebody outside top 10, a tune-up fight, and then fight somebody who is of higher stature. If he does that, then I'm pretty sure TJ Dillashaw will be able to be in the same name or in the same discussion of possibly fighting for a title. The dude's a former champion for a reason, and he was at one point one of the biggest names in the UFC. So the future of TJ Dillashaw, we're uncertain about that. We're uncertain about the future of Anthony Pettis. We're uncertain of the future of many fighters going into the year 2021. But I expect great things. The UFC made a whole lot of money and was incredibly successful in the year of 2020. And going to 2021, I expect big things to happen for the organization. With that being said, I hope everybody has an awesome holidays. Wherever you are, whoever you are, hopefully your holidays goes well. As the year of, sports has gone through a complicated 2020. We're going to 2020 right now. The UFC looks like everything's going back to normal for the UFC. Bellator has been doing great. Actually, I just checked up on a recent chart that their money has been going up as of late, though. The Bellator has increasingly been making a lot more money as years have gone by. PFL is getting bigger names. Kayla Harrison truly is becoming a star for the organization. One Championships, they're expanding. Their shows have been stellar, and you should really watch One Championships when you get the chance. All their events are free, by the way. Like, the day after the event happens, you can go watch all One Championship events. Invicta FC continues to give out the best women's fighters out there in the world. And I am excited for the future of mixed martial arts. And so with that being said, all I gotta say is thank you. Have a happy holidays. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts podcast network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.